Gehed mir Falcha. Welcome everyone, my name is Darren Kuzma and this is Mind the Crack, a series of webinars we are doing on life improvement tools, or your online life hacks as we like to call it, based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard. Today's topic is, can a toxic relationship suppress your motivation? So, with that being introduced, I'm now going to check in. I am live here on Zoom, in a Zoom chat. If you're here following me on Zoom, please give me a thumbs up or a wave. Let me know that you're there and ready to go. If you're on any of the other platforms, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or whatnot, I do have another person, Michelle is her name. She is helping host on the other platforms. If you have any questions, or you like something that you have heard, or you'd like to participate, please go ahead and put them into the comment section, and then Michelle can pass them over to me so I can have your participation here live in the webinar. And we do make it a webinar for the purpose of participation, not just as online video, though it will be in that form later on, but having it in a form where you can participate and really engage by looking at, and I'm going to often ask about things that you have experienced, things that you have done, how you have tried to handle something, and then present some new information. And it's in that way that sharing a new reality for you to compare it to your own experience to see whether it will fit, whether it will clash. But by comparing new realities, you definitely get to learn. So just looking at new information and not comparing it and not seeing how it would work for you isn't a key component of learning. You will get more learning out of making comparison and seeing how something may fit into your life. So it's for that reason that we're choosing to do this as a webinar, and I hope you will join in with me today. Okay, so I'm just going to type in a little message there on Zoom. So if you're following me there on Zoom, please let me know how you're doing today. Okay, so as I mentioned, the content is based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard, and in Scientology there is such a broad, vast amount of information that has been codified, and therefore every piece of information you can relate to other aspects of life. And so for that reason, I have found Scientology to be a comprehensive and complete and ordered sort of subject to study, and it does cover really all of knowledge. If you're searching for motivation tools or other advice on relationships in the miasma of YouTube or other online content, you will find things quite often true, but many times, and most of the time actually, disjointed and not related to other things. So when we're looking at any subject in these webinars, I'm not giving the full panorama of everything that you can understand about a subject. I'm just choosing certain points to highlight them so that you can get a little bit of a familiarity and understand the logic and the genius that has gone into developing these tools and putting everything together. Okay, so with that said, what is my experience with the subject of motivation and bad relationships, or toxic relationships, if you like? Well, I have definitely had my share of toxic relationships, of relationships that I wish that I hadn't had, that I walked into willingly and having a desire about, having a good relationship and it turning out poorly. And I've also, over many years, helped other people with their relationships that were bad and not helpful to their motivation. And I've had it from both sides. I've had a period of my life where I didn't understand and the work of L. Ron Hubbard, or didn't have the information there. I had all the best intentions of the teachings of school and, from my family, that information. And then I had a period of my life, of course, where I had the information of L. Ron Hubbard, and I can definitely see that there is a huge difference in my calmness in relating to people, my ability to understand people. And then when I do run into someone who isn't a nice person, who is trying to zap my motivation, because I have understanding, it puts me at a much higher level of awareness and ability to handle that person. Now, you may have heard me speak about something that L. Ron Hubbard discovered, which is a relationship between three things: knowledge, responsibility, and control. So it's called the KRC Triangle, and I'm going to talk about this a few times because this is how you will understand why knowledge and gaining knowledge is a thing that once you have it, you will be able to gain more responsibility and take more control of your life. So let's look at it in this way. When you know about something, and let's say this is the knowledge of how a person behaves, what causes a person to behave in a certain way? Why would they actually be an antisocial type of person? Well, when you have that information and you know it, then you will be able to control your relationship with them. Now, control, L. Ron Hubbard sort of dissected that to say that it has the component parts of start, change, and stop. So if you have knowledge about something, about a person, the way they operate, you will understand how they will start, how they will change, and how they will stop. And by having that information or that ability to know how those things will happen, you yourself can control the relationship and be in control rather than and choose what you want to happen rather than having all various manifestations occur without you knowing why. And then of course you can take more responsibility for it because you know how it works and you know the different stages of operation. Okay, so that's the KRC Triangle, and that's the reason that this knowledge is so valuable, or gaining any knowledge is so valuable, because it does help you to be at cause and to control situations. To further illustrate that point, I want to bring up two things. You may be aware of someone that has been awaiting a diagnosis at a doctor's office or by a doctor. When you don't know the diagnosis, when you don't have knowledge of what it is that the person is experiencing with the health, so they have a health problem, but you don't know what the health problem is, the person cannot embark upon a plan of treatment. They cannot start to do something with certainty. They can't take responsibility for themselves because they don't know what it is. So just the point of getting the information, getting a diagnosis, the knowledge of what it is, will actually help someone to begin to put in some control over their health condition. So that ease, that tremendous ease, that calmness in your mind, that certainty of direction that comes about with knowledge, you will have an example of that in life. Even to the point, if you walk to an intersection that you are not familiar with and you perhaps press the button on the lights. Now you may not know that at that set of lights, that when you press the button, there's no lights that light up, there's no indication given to you that the terminal has received the input that you have made. So it puts you in a confused state. You end up pressing the button a number of times, looking around to see what the lights are and that sort of thing. So you can see not having the knowledge of something really does put you into a confused, uneasy state of things. Okay, so it's for that reason that finding out this information about antisocial people, people that are toxic, that is that's why it's very, very important. Okay, so I'm just going to have a look over and see if Michelle has any information across the different platforms. That would be great to hear from you, Michelle, if you have any info there. Give us a thumbs up or a wave or a like if you understood what I just went over. If you have any questions, likewise, pop them into the chat so I can get to those, because I'd certainly like to interact. Okay, let's look at some definitions first, because it always helps us orient to the subject. And we're going to look at the definition of the word toxic. Here we go. This is from the Oxford Dictionary. You can find this online. Toxic: very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way. So pervasive across and getting in through and everything, and insidious, not easily able to be detected or happening or creeping in slowly. So harmful or unpleasant in that kind of way. So before we run off and then label anyone who has caused you harm or made you feel unpleasant in any kind of way, before we run off and just label them as toxic, let's look at a clarifier from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary online, which I happen to like. Okay, what is a toxic person? And this is actually a usage note along with the word, and it says toxic can mean extremely harsh, malicious, or harmful. Okay, so the word that I think is key there is malicious. So malicious has the idea of an intention to harm. Okay, harsh, extremely harsh, malicious, intention to harm or intention to hurt, or harmful. Okay, the next part it says, which is often the intention when describing an individual as toxic. Okay, so that's key. The intention to harm when describing an individual as toxic. Now I'm going to add to that something that L. Ron Hubbard described. Now, he described it as a person who is a suppressive type of person. Okay, and he gives this word suppress, and I'm going to read you some points of what he has said about it. This entire subject, actually, of an antisocial person, you could say, has a rather comprehensive course that is available that you can do that takes you in all the ins and outs of how to confront and shatter someone who is acting toward you in a suppressive way, who is toxic to you. So I'm going to give you this information here extra. Suppress: to squash, to sit on, to make smaller, to refuse to let reach, to make uncertain about his reaching, or render or lessen in any way possible, by any means possible, to the harm of the individual and for fancied protection of the suppressor. So there it is. There's that key, that last part of it, for the fancied protection of the suppressor. All right, I'm going to come back to that, but let me just go through those other parts. So if you are feeling like you're being squashed, like you're being stopped, you're being made smaller, you're thinking about reaching, but you've been stopped physically from reaching. You've been made uncertain in your mind about reaching, or you've been feeling like you've been lessened in any way so that you are harmed by someone else, then we can say that that person is having a toxic relationship toward you. Okay, so again, the intention is there to harm you. And again, intention to harm. Why? What is the intention to harm coming from? It is coming from, as L. Ron Hubbard very correctly observed, for the fancied protection of the suppressor. So a fancied, so dreamt up, or the idea in the mind that it is for the protection of that person, the toxic person or the suppressive person, if you would like. Okay, so what is this fancied protection wound up with, or what is it bound up with? Well, it's actually bound up with the subject of survival. L. Ron Hubbard discovered that the lowest common denominator of existence is the command or the urge or the drive to survive. And that is clear and evident in every aspect of life. And everyone is really trying to survive. There's a whole webinar we could do on the subject of survival and how it relates to the different aspects of life. But the reason that a toxic person is suppressing you or trying to harm you or having the intention to harm you, they think is for their protection in order to survive. So, summing up, the reason someone is toxic is, and has it in for you if they're trying to stop you, is related to this concept of survival. The toxic person is only themselves trying to survive. Okay, so let's put a little bit more in context with this. Let's look at the example or comparison of competition and suppression. Okay, so I'll give you an example. There's a fellow I know. He has a project that he's putting together, and he wants that project to be the best it possibly can be. He's creating it, putting all sorts of ideas into how he can be the best or the first to achieve the release of this product so that he can get the greatest market share, let's say the greatest profit, the greatest sort of impact on the market. Now, that's fantastic. He's having that intention. Now, by him releasing that product or having that project go ahead, could it harm the other group's profit? Sure, it could. But the intention for him to do well in his project is separate from his intention toward the other group. He also didn't go to any lengths of underhanded acts like spreading gossip or spreading rumors about the other group, or even sending bad information, discouraging information to the other group to try to dissuade them from entering into another project if there was another person. So that competition, okay, that healthy, desire to lead in a marketplace or to survive or get good exchange for the product or the project that someone has made, is actually quite different from someone then intending to sabotage or to put down so that they feel that they can survive. So hopefully that gives you a clear distinction between the two. Well, another example. all you need to do is turn on the television at the time of either Christmas sales, or even we have Black Friday that's coming up. And I've definitely seen it in the American stores, American footage, where there's a whole bunch of people waiting outside the store, waiting for it to open, and they all flood in. And they're elbowing each other, and they're trampling on people, and they're climbing over all sorts of things, and, babies in prams and things and all sorts of stuff. Usually it's, November and cold, jackets and hats and things flying, as people, without any, without holding back, are actually harming other people to get at what it is that they want. So yes, they're trying to survive better. They've got a certain limited, amount of money in their budget, and they need to get that gift for their toy or their son, whatever it is, to make them happy, or daughter, whatever it might be. So you can see that when one abandons, virtuous conduct, or what is considered moral, or what is considered kind or courteous, you could say, when they abandon those things and harm other people to that end, to achieve something, you can start to see that the relationship that you have towards that person is not something that's helping you. It's putting you down so that they can get ahead. And hopefully we don't see that on December the 1st, when the shops that are selling current contraband like socks and t-shirts and things open up in Ireland. But anyway, we have been proven wrong before. So I want to give you another example of something, and this might actually put into perspective the level of survival, the level of desperation that this sort of person, the toxic person, actually has. Now, I was a surf lifesaver in Australia, as well as a lifesaver in a pool, and one of the first things that you are taught in approaching or rescuing someone who is drowning is that you don't get near them. And the reason for that is that that person, if they are so close to dying, they will do anything. That impulse to survive is so strong, they will ignore you as a living human being without rational thought. They will try and climb upon you, and they will try and not necessarily pull you down, but they will, out of their own desperation to survive, to try and get air, they will push you down, and as has happened in a number of cases, the rescuer has been the one that has been killed. Now, if you look at that, that makes total sense, because all they're doing is this impulse to survive. They're just trying to get up. It's so deep rooted that all logic is basically, it disappears at that point in time. So what you do is you approach with a pole, a stick, a flotation device, jacket, ring, whatever that might be, and you push that across to the person. And by letting their fear de-intensify, it de-escalates the situation for you, where you can approach that person then and actually tow them to shore by getting near to them, because they're not so desperate. So if that is a good analogy, and I think it is that someone that is toxic, or someone that is doing things for the intent to harm you, they are at such a low level of survival that they are clawing at or trying to pull other people down in such a desperate way that you kind of have to feel sorry for them in some ways, because they consider themselves so unable to survive that they have to pull others down. Okay, so hopefully that gives a little bit of perspective about where these people really are, who are trying to intentionally harm you so that they can survive. Okay. So, don't be surprised that if you suddenly become successful, or you may even see this around celebrities, people that are actually surviving very, very well sometimes have a small proportion of the people that collect to them as these toxic type of people, these suppressive type of people, because what they want to do is like a vampire. They want to suck onto the success of that survival source, just so that they can get a little drip feed, so that they're not going to be so close to death or not surviving themselves. So next time you have a surge of motivation or a surge of success, or some successful project occurs and you're doing really well, just be wary that a small percentage of people, very small actually, might actually be clinging on or asking to work with you for the wrong reason. Anyway, just keep that in mind. Okay, so the basic thing to understand is that a toxic person is acting out of their own desire to survive. Be it rational or not, it is still the computation that they have, and survival is their motivation. So, coming back to the definition of motivation, we covered it earlier. Webinar's definition of motivation is to do with getting a reason to get into action, or feeling or getting some will or desire to do something. So the end result really of motivation, or the target of motivation, is so that doing this or activity is created. And in that particular way, we're not talking about thinking, okay? The intention of the toxic person, therefore, is not related to stopping you from thinking, but we haven't got to the stage of the thought police just yet. But the toxic person around you is going to be attempting to stop your action, stop your doing this. Stop the things that you are doing getting ahead. So, the basic answer to the question, can a toxic relationship suppress your motivation? The basic answer is yes, if you hadn't got it from now, right? So, next factor. These toxic people, or the people that are trying to bring you down, they basically can seem two-faced. Now, give you an example. You've all seen the movies, and I don't know any gangsters myself, but I have definitely seen people that have operated in the same sort of way as this example. You know, you see the gangster, he's on the telephone, and he's on to one of his henchmen, and he's just ordered the killing of 10 people from a rival gang. And then he puts down the phone, then he turns around to his little niece or nephew, and with such virtue and high morals, starts to explain to the little child how it's important to share with the brother, or how they shouldn't fight and how they need to take care of each other. And when you see that kind of thing, it's quite a contrast that can be puzzling. And in your own life, spotting these people that are trying to drag you down can sometimes be pretty confusing. Simply because, on one hand, they might be buying you things or giving you hugs or saying that they love you or various things, and on the other hand, doing you in or stopping a project. And it may not even be so clear. You know, someone might be openly towards you, very nice, and, you know, oh, you're lovely, and I love you, and I want to stay with you, and I want to be with you, and let's make all these grand plans of things, but then behind their back, operating in some clandestine sort of hidden way, covered covertly, to stop you in your actions and make your projects fall apart. So identifying these people can actually be quite tricky. Therefore, identifying these people that you have these types of relationships with does require confront of evil, is something that L. Ron Hubbard termed. So being able to admit perhaps that you chose the wrong relationship, or you chose the wrong person, and then say to yourself, I did love them, I thought they were a great person, but I actually got it wrong, can really be a letdown to your own survival. And you need to check your bias on that and realize for yourself that no matter what happens, you will persist and that you can go on. People that stay in relationships that aren't actually any good for them can often be because they don't want to swallow their own pride and admit that they made a mistake. So, being able to confront, to actually perceive what is there, to see what really is happening, and say and admit to yourself that that is actually happening, can often be a barrier for identifying this toxic person or this suppressive person also. So, it takes quite a bit to confront and see whether or not you have made a mistake, and be able to realize that you have a bad judge of character or something like that. I know myself. I had a relationship with a girl that went the wrong way, and I had to admit that she was not the right person for me, but she was probably the right person for a number of other guys, and probably is still trying to survive. Anyway, not that I'm bitter about that. So, a person around you trying to survive themselves is going to affect your motivation. So, I would like to ask all of you out there now, if anyone would like to share on any situations that you ran into, or how you identified someone who you didn't think was a toxic person, that you had a bad relationship with, that was kind of covered or it was covert in some sort of way. I'd like to hear from you. You can put a comment there. You can let me know. I don't have to read out any names, but if you had a relationship with someone that it started off well and then didn't end up well, or someone that was actively trying to stop you or killed your motivation, you can put that in the comment section or send a message across. I'd really like to hear, to be able to share. Perhaps it might make someone else out there a little bit more aware to the situation they are encountering. Okay, so let's move on to the next section. Michelle, just let me know if we have any comments that are coming there. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's look at some mechanics here. We already went over quite easily. The toxic person is doing what they're doing to you, whether they're bringing you down, they're spreading bad news, they're attacking you openly or covertly. That you being able to spot them is in itself, just like receiving the medical diagnosis can set you at ease, because it can set a plan in motion or allow you to understand what the problem is at least, that understanding the characteristics of an antisocial person, this type of toxic person, and how they have harmful intent, just understanding the characteristics is a very, very important point. And this book here is called A New Slant on Life. And in this book, L. Ron Hubbard goes over a number of characteristics of an antisocial person. And before you get carried away, I'm just spotting everyone around you and all the different antisocial characteristics that they might have. Do bear in mind that you also have to measure a person up against their social characteristics. Otherwise, you simply get into a state where a witch hunt kind of ensues from your, well, they have this characteristic, oh, they must be suppressive, oh, this one, they must be toxic because they have this. You see, so you need to understand that. And this book, A New Slant on Life, here's a book that contains a number of articles where L. Ron Hubbard goes over these different characteristics and a number of other things related to human behavior that will give you that knowledge for you to be able to spot who it is that's around you that is wishing or intending you harm. Okay, so that's one book there in particular. Now, before we go on, I do have an origination here I would like to share with you. Let me just read that. Okay, so there was a person, had a relationship with another for about 4 years, and during the 4 years, they were killing each other. And now they're amazing friends, and they're even great friends with the wife. They obviously split up. I was certainly unmotivated with him, and now being his friend, I feel a lot different, even motivated by him. And you know, isn't that an interesting thing? I've had it myself in certain ways. You had a relationship with someone, and you just clashed. There could be various reasons why you clash, and it just didn't work. And then being separate or not in the same environment, that person could go on and, you know, be sane and fine and rational toward their other person, and then you go off and do the same thing, and then you can have a normal relationship that is not on that level of, let's say, a committed, close relationship in a family type unit. So yes, people do change, and the sort of factors that can contribute to someone feeling like they're not surviving in one relationship but feeling like they are surviving in another one are quite complicated, but that is a fantastic example. Thanks for passing that along, Michelle. Is that there are, as I mentioned, we're going to do more webinars on this point of relationships. There are many factors that can cause someone to act nasty towards you. The base one, of course, has to do with survival, as I mentioned, but that's a good example of how people sometimes just don't mix together. They just don't go well together. They press each other's buttons, or they in some way implicate the other person as causing their downfall or their lack of survival, and vice versa. So, great story. It's good to bring that into context. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I just spoke about this point of gaining the knowledge of a toxic person or a suppressive person, and understanding the characteristics, and having those characteristics is contained in this book here. Getting that knowledge, even just identifying someone in your life, and like that in that example, when you spotted or you identified, oh wow, that's the person that's actually causing me the trouble. Simply doing that can bring about a huge relief. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so the next step beyond that is, of course, we have to think about, and L. Ron Hubbard actually sort of laid it out this way. So let me say this. He said, a harmful intention or action against which one cannot fight back is the definition of suppression. So when someone is harming you or doing something towards you, and against that harmful intention you can't fight back, then you are being suppressed. But, he says further, thus when one can do anything about it, it is less suppressive. So that, therefore, is a very powerful datum that opens the door for you to be able to do something actively once you have identified that suppressive person. And I mentioned the word gradient there, and you can look in some of the previous webinars where we're looking at learning a difficult subject and how gradients relate to that sort of thing. And even on motivation, we're looking at where does inner motivation come from, taking things on a gradient. This concept of gradients is central to a lot of different concepts in Scientology. And if you look at it, what it says in that advice there, once again, when you can do something about it, it is less suppressive. So you're being stopped, you're being blocked from reaching, you're being made uncertain about reaching, and you don't know where that's coming from. So your motivation is down. First step, find who that person is. Find that suppressive person, that person that is creating or being toxic towards you, and then on a gradient, do something about it. Thus, when one can do anything about it, it is less suppressive. So that's a very powerful datum, and just by putting yourself able to outflow, putting something out there, writing a communication, sending something out, getting something done, by doing that, you are on a gradient overcoming that toxic relationship. Okay, so that's the second powerful datum. And then, in relation to that, here is another point, and I actually want to read this to you from another book. And this book is called The Way to Happiness. And just in regard to that gradient handling of someone who is toxic towards you, and then you on a gradient improving your motivation and getting things done. This is what L. Ron Hubbard said in this book, The Way to Happiness. In regard to people that are attacking you and stopping you, the real handling of such a situation and such people, the real way to defeat them is to flourish and prosper. Very, very powerful words. And if you look at the genius and the wisdom in that, if you think about it, what is it that the person that is around you trying to suppress you or squash you or stop you, they're looking at how you're surviving. And by stopping you from surviving, in some way they're calculating that that helps them survive. So, if they have such a loss in achieving that, they will go further into a loss and feel like they are not surviving by attacking you. They will then move off and perhaps look in other quarters for attack and sort of ways to survive. So by you continuing to flourish and prosper, doing it on a gradient, finding something that you can do, and just improving your motivation, continuing to get things done in spite of everything that may be blowing up around you that's created, by these covert operations or other things behind your back, or even overtly to your face, but by persisting and not stopping and not giving up, you will drive that toxic person into a state where they will just give up and fall down. Not that we wish harm against anyone, but you shouldn't cooperate with anyone that has that sort of intention towards you. Okay, so that's The Way to Happiness. This is the book New Slant on Life. This is another book called Self-Analysis, and this is something that was written in by L. Ron Hubbard that goes over some different lists and things that you can do for yourself, not just understanding how people operate, but understanding yourself and your relationship to these types of people in the past, how they may have invalidated you through domination, or invalidated you through nullifying you, or putting you down in certain ways. So this book here will help you to recount through your past, looking at the different people that you've related to that have been acting in this way toward you. And simply by identifying these people in your past, you will experience great relief, because you'll understand perhaps that your failures or your difficulties that you've had in the past may not have been created by yourself. You may have been being sabotaged. And that brings me to the subject of my next webinar, which has to do with failures and how they may have killed your motivation. So I'm going to check in with Michelle before I go. If you have any questions or is anything else you would like me to cover, I would be very happy to do so. So I'm just going to check in. Okay, good. So Michelle let me know there. So I hope you enjoyed that webinar. If you would like to get a hold of any of these books, I did refer to a lot of content, and it's not just covered in these books. There's many other resources that we have that cover this subject of suppressive people or people that are trying to get you down, and even motivation. So there'll be a link that appears in the chat You can click on that link if you want to buy any of the books. You can also click on another link which should appear there, which will give you a free consultation with one of our staff members. And that's a no obligation consultation for you to talk personally about some of the issues that you may have with one of our staff, and just to find out what book or what piece of information will actually be the most appropriate for you to deal with the challenge that you're most immediately facing in life. So, as I glance across to see if Michelle has any other questions, I see that we don't, so that's fantastic. My next webinar, join me tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. tomorrow. Please let others know. We're going to look at the subject of failures and how that affects motivation, possibly have an interview with someone. So I hope you enjoy. Leave your comments, leave your suggestions. If there's other topics that you'd like to hear us talk about here, or you'd like to find out on other subjects, please let me know and put it in the comment section. But if you've got likes, waves, thumbs up, all that sort of thing, please do share. And I hope you enjoyed the content today. Shanae for today. We'll see you next time.